Good morning and welcome to Adam Answers Anything. I'm your host, Adam, and originally it was funny because when I was workshopping the title of the show, hold on. When I was workshopping the title of the show with my wife, she was like, "Oh, you could call it Adam Answers Absolutely Anything at All." And I thought, that's funny because I love alliteration, alliteration is the only reason why this show is called what it is. It has nothing to do with me thinking I actually know answers to things. It's and everything to do with just it's alliteration, and it's a pretty apt description of the show. I don't really know anything. I'm just a guy that likes answering questions, and I like alliteration, so that's why the show is called Adam Answers Anything, absolutely anything at all. So welcome. This is our second show. First one was a couple of days ago. I had originally planned to do this once a week, but I thought, you know what? Have some time in the morning. Figured I'll give it a go in the morning on Saturday just to see how it goes. But a couple of quick notes before we just dive right into our question for today. If you have a perspective or a view on the question of the day, I would love to hear it. I am more interested in what you have to say than what I have to say. And so leave a comment in the chat, leave a comment in the live chat or wherever, whichever one. And I'd love to read it, and I'd also love to share it in upcoming episodes. I'd love to share your perspective on the questions that we wrestle with and tackle here on the show. And so if you want to leave that perspective, your perspective, I would love to hear it, love to read it, and I'd also love to share it in future episodes. Also, you'll notice there's a QR code in the top corner there. The QR code is, if you scan that, you can ask your own question, and I will answer your question to the best of my ability. And your questions can really be about anything. So it can be about anything. What flavor of ice cream I like, or something, like what's my favorite planet. But it could also be something, philosophical, which is kind of the niche of the channel. Sonderhouse used to be For the Love of It, now it's Sonderhouse. And so the niche is sort of philosophy, practical philosophy. And so the questions that have preset are sort of geared around that. Some of them are more cultural conversations, some of them are more deep philosophical reflections. So yeah, at any point, feel free to scan that QR code, and feel free to ask your own question. I would love to answer them, and I would love to just have a conversation with you about it. So we're going to dive right into our question for today. And today's question is a little different than last question. If you remember, last question we answered was, is it better to know painful truths or to live in blissful ignorance? And today's question is a little more just kind of cultural perspective. And so our question for today is, should you use or should you try online dating? I think this is a question that's been asked. Well, I saw this question being asked. I forgot where it was, but it was somewhere on a forum. And I thought, man, this is a really great question. I know that this question has been asked exhaustively over the past 10, 15 years, for sure. But I still think it's a pretty relevant question, especially as we are beginning to enter into a very new age of the internet. And how does this new age of the internet shape the way we do online dating? That's a really great question. So just like the last question we asked a couple days ago, I'm going to approach this question in 3 specific ways. The first 2 ways are more of a kind of broad stroke answer, broad stroke approach. And the third way is more of like a personal perspective as a Christian. So it would be my personal perspective on this question. So the first way we're going to answer the question is by saying, what are some of the reasons why you would do online dating? What are some of the reasons that makes online dating good or like beneficial, for example? And I think I would say One of the reasons is accessibility. I certainly know that when I when I was living in Seattle, I didn't really understand how introverted the entire city of Seattle was before I moved there. And so when I moved there, I had a pretty difficult time kind of breaking in and cracking in and making friendships because it's a city literally full of introverts, and I am more extroverted, more towards the extroversion scale, and I had a really hard time making friendships. And so I could imagine in a scenario like that perhaps online dating could be a useful tool because maybe you struggle meeting new people. Maybe there's not many aspects or I should say avenues in your life where you're meeting new people, and you're more comfortable with trying that with online dating. That's one potential positive to it. Another positive is just the more you the more you do online dating, the more you start narrowing down what exactly it is that you're looking for. Because I know that this was kind of a part of my story. Um, because when it comes to online dating, I have, um, let me think. I would say I have about 12 years of online dating experience before I met my wife. And so I've used just about every app that you could possibly fathom, even the ones that um, are like third party, really like you would look at it and think of this as spam. Like I've even used those ones. Um, and so in my experience, I think that there was the benefit of knowing what I wasn't looking for, even if I didn't know what I was looking for. And so I think that is a benefit. Again, it just depends on your approach. I mean, if you are approaching online dating with that mindset, I think it could be a healthy thing to help you try and figure out like who are you looking for. Another thing I'd say, a third thing, this could be considered a positive, is location. Like, for example, like you're not limited to just your community, your local kind of pool of possible candidates. The possibilities are a lot far ranging. I mean, you could meet someone in Florida, or you could meet someone in Oregon, or you can meet someone in Vermont, and have a relationship and build a connection. I have several friends that met their significant others long distance through online dating, and it worked out really well, and they have wonderful marriages. uh Distance relationships are very, very difficult, and they're not for everybody. And so even though that is a positive, like that is one reason why people might want to do online dating, it is difficult to do distance relationship. So I'm going to move into, so that was kind of like a few reasons for why I think people might want to try online dating, or why you should use it. But now I want to move into the reasons why you shouldn't, or maybe not so forceful as shouldn't, but maybe give you caution. Reasons that should maybe give you caution, give you pause, and maybe consider approaching it differently. So like I said, I did online dating for 12 years, and if you name a dating platform, I've used it at a point in my life. And the first thing I think should be said is that the online dating experience for men and women are vastly, vastly different. And the nuances of that could be argued up and down. I definitely don't want to argue that here. I can really only speak for what the experience is like as a man, but I do know that the experience as a woman is vastly different. And it comes with its own set of challenges, but I think some of the challenges that I'm going to talk about apply to both men and women. So one of the challenges that I think you face with online dating is I would say something along the lines of inauthentic how do I say that? Lack of authenticity, which sounds counterproductive because you'd think to yourself, oh, like yeah, like they have a profile, you can read everything about them. and you could read just like what they like, what they don't like. You can see their pictures, everything. What do you mean it's not authentic? Well, I think it's the same. It's the same. It's the same thing that happens with social media. It's not that you're seeing a lie; it's that you're seeing the best parts of that person, or you're seeing the parts that they want other people to see. And maybe that's not inauthentic, but it is in the sense that it's easy for you to approach a situation or approach a potential, I guess, candidate with the mindset of, wow, this person looks like A plus, stellar, real, like this is excellent. And you kind of can make the mistake of getting more invested at the beginning than you should based on what you perceive as like a 95% match, which like a month down the road turns to be an only like a 40% match. And that can be really difficult when you're trying to filter through profiles, and profiles have all these descriptions, and you're just trying to take them at face value and then realizing, well, that you can't really do that anymore. Which is kind of ironic because that's like kind of how real life works. Like you meet someone, you don't really know anything about them, but you get to know them. And I believe that the process of getting to know someone in person is much more deeply, I don't want to say valuable, but I kind of want to use that word. It's more authentic, at least I'll use that word, than reading a kind of like profile about them. So that's one of the disadvantages to online dating. I would say that another disadvantage is, I want to say, burnout. Because, and this again, this is from a man's perspective because I can only speak from that perspective fully. And if there's any women that are watching this, I would love for you to share your perspective in the chat. Share it in the comments below. Uh, but it can be exhausting when you're going from profile to profile to profile, and you're leaving a like or you're saying hello, and maybe one out of 20. In fact, I remember when I was doing online dating before I met my wife, I actually did the calculations. It was less than 10%. So like if I messaged 110 people, I would maybe get, so it's much less than 10%. I'd maybe get 3 people to respond of like 110 profiles that I'd message. Now, that's kind of like a difficult statistic because I don't really know. I didn't really know how many of those profiles were real or fake, 'cause some of those were definitely fake and I just didn't realize it. But I remember doing the math, and it was very discouraging because I'm like, I mean, how is online dating supposed to be much better if I just feel burned out to the point where I don't give any effort, or I have lost the desire to give an effort to get to know someone in a qualitative way? And that's really important because the danger is that mindset seeping into your personal relationships, like face to face. Because when you've gotten to a point where you're just so exhausted that you aren't really interested in getting to know someone anymore because you've just accepted that they're going to reject you, they're going to reject your um like your, what is it called, like your moves. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like they're just going to reject you. If you've gotten to that point, then like, well, you're just kind of not interested in getting to know people in real life either. I mean, it's kind of going to be the same because our one of the ways our brain learns is through repetitiveness, like through experience, just like Pavlov's dogs. Like you do something, there's a stimulus. You do something again, there's a stimulus. Like over and over and over and over again, our brain thinks, okay, when I do that thing, this thing's going to happen because that's always occurred. And so when you're doing online dating and it's just rejection, 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 your brain eventually is going to build a subconscious belief that even in real life, if you meet someone, they're just going to reject you. And that's not healthy. And I can say that from first-hand experience because I went through that. Another disadvantage, and I think this is perhaps, I would say one of the biggest disadvantages, is that when you have more choice. So let's back up. We live in a very free market open society where we're very individualistic. And being very individualistic, we have this sense of, well, I need to validate my individual freedom by making as many choices as I can on my own volition. In other words, the more control I have over these certain aspects of my life, the more individual freedom that I have. Or you could say the more autonomy I have, because there's a slight difference between freedom and autonomy. I actually have a video about it on my YouTube channel. Um, and so online dating is kind of a byproduct of that individualistic pursuit of autonomy and control in every aspect of our lives. And when you are given more choice, we feel like we have more control. For example, if I go to the store and I come home with a box of chocolate puff cereal, or Cocoa Puffs, I should say, Cocoa Puff cereal, and my wife says, "Why'd you get Cocoa Puffs?" Well, if there was only two choices, I could tell her, well, it was either this or Kashi Go Lean Crunch. Well, I didn't really have much choice. And so there really wasn't a lot of autonomy to get exactly what it was that we wanted, exactly the kind of cereal that we wanted. Well, if I go to the market and there's perhaps 7 varieties of cereal, right? There's Fruity Pebbles, there's Lucky Charms, there's Tricks, and I come home with, some Golden Grams or something. No, Golden Grams, that's not cereal. I come home with some Honey Nut Oats. It's like, oh, well, this is a lot more like what we really wanted. Well, it's because there was more options. And so because there was more options, I felt like I had more control over picking the option that best suited what we really wanted. And so naturally, we think, okay, well, the more options you have, the more control you have, the more autonomy you have in selecting the thing that you want, which is a validation of our individual freedom or individual autonomy. But the problem is when you go to the store and there's, let's say, 75 options, 75 different types of cereal on the shelf, this long row of cereal, and you're standing there trying to figure out which one is the one that best fits exactly what you are looking for. Because after all, we want control over the choices that we make. And so we have to pick the best possible choice, right? Well, research actually shows, and in fact, this very phenomenon is called the paradox of choice, that when we're given so many options to choose from, like too many options to choose from, it's actually more likely that we don't make a decision, or more likely that we make the wrong, like the worst decision. Like if there's 75 options of cereal, it's more likely we'll end up making a decision worse than if there was only 10. So apply that concept to online dating. The difficult part about online dating is you're presented with a seemingly endless amount of options as you're just swiping through profiles, swiping through profiles, swiping through profiles. The more options that we're presented with, the more sense of control we believe that we have. Because remember, instinctively, we believe that if we have more options, therefore we have more control over what we ultimately choose. We have more control over finding the option that is exactly the thing that we're looking for. But if you're scrolling through an endless amount of options, you have a greater sense of, well, I have control. That leads to a greater sense of expectation. Because if you believe that you have a greater sense of control because you have a greater number of options, well, then your expectation of finding exactly what you want is much higher, right? Let's talk about the cereal again. If I walk into the grocery store and there's 75 options of cereal, not only am I going to believe, ooh, I have a lot more control over the decision that I make, but I'm also going to have a higher expectation that I'm going to find exactly the cereal at exactly the price and exactly the quantity that I want. The more the more options, the more control, the more expectation. At least that's how our brains function. The problem is, and this is the paradox of choice, the problem is that it makes it less likely for us to make a decision because as our expectations increase exponentially, it actually causes us less likely to make a decision out of the fear that we'll make the wrong decision. And it paralyzes us. And this is actually called analysis paralysis. You've probably heard that term before. And analysis paralysis is when there's so many options that your brain can't physically adjust or filter through all of the variables that go into making the right choice. It can't physically sift through them because there's so many options that it just freezes and you're unable to make a choice. And it creates anxiety and it creates tension. And so, statistically, most of the time, when you have too many choices, you end up not making a choice at all. So, that's one of the things that happens with online dating is you end up not making a choice or being unable to settle on any relationship because there's so many choices that you're overwhelmed with the ability to choose. And it also leads with it also leads into the idea of island hopping. The fact that when you've made a choice, like let's say you've started a conversation with a woman, you've started a conversation with a man, and the conversation leads to dating. Well, your brain is instinctively going to second guess the decision that it's made because remember, there were a seemingly endless number of decisions. And so your brain is thinking, okay, well, is this the best possible decision out of every single option that I could find? Is this the best possible one? And it's in this endless loop of never being satisfied with the decision that you've made because your brain's just going to think, well, maybe there's an even better decision on the next island, over the next hill, around the next turn. If I just keep searching just a little bit, maybe I'll find the right one. Sounds a lot like gambling behavior too, actually. And so our brains just instinctively assume that maybe there's something better on the other side. And so it makes it, not only does it paralyze us from making a decision, but it also makes it so that when we've made a decision, we're unsettled in that decision. We don't feel like this is like the final decision because maybe there's a better one right across the corner. Maybe there's something better or someone better right across, over the turn. Also, remember, because our expectations are so high about what we're going to find and who we're going to find, when we've made a decision and there's something difficult to live with about that person, which is every marriage, um, I'm automatically like just like regret. We have regret because like if I picked if there's 75 options of cereal and I picked Honey Nut Oats or Honey Nut Cheerios, sorry, if I picked Honey Nut Cheerios and I go home and I start eating it and I think, ah, man, kind of wish there was some fruitiness to this. I regret that decision. And I regret it to such a degree that, and there's again, there's statistics, there's data to show this. I regret it to such a degree that it leads to depression. It's actually a very common occurrence for people that are faced with the paradox of choice. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to be depressed about which cereal I chose, but certainly if you are under the presumption that you've chosen the wrong partner for your life because there were so many options, you chose one of those options, and maybe they leave their shoes in front of the door all the time, and you're just like, man, this person so messy, I can't live with this. And your brain is like, man, there were so many other options, I'm depressed that I picked the wrong one. I think that is one of the biggest dangers of online dating. And I think that as we're entering into this new kind of digital culture, because we're kind of entering into, I want to say, post dead internet conversations right now about social media, about the way we interact online. And finally, um, research and data is finally catching up to what we've known all along. And it's that social media is having a profoundly negative impact on our lives and especially in the lives of our children. And knowing that, well, the question becomes, why is it having such a profoundly negative effect? I think that one of the reasons, because I think it's multifaceted, there's not just one explanation, but I do think that one of the larger explanations is the paradox of choice. Is like the more that we want to pursue relative autonomy and freedom in our lives, the more anxiety we have and the more depression we have. Because when we're given options of this platform and this channel and that channel and this video and those videos, this TikToker and this Instagrammer and this all of this information and all of this entertainment and all of this media that we could ever possibly consume, it has gone well beyond the scope of a reasonable array of choice. It has gone well beyond it, and our brains are unable to make the most satisfying decision that we could. I mean, why do you think that YouTubers 10 years ago, in kind of the heyday of YouTube, did so well? It's because that even though there were still thousands of options to choose from, it was still a satisfying amount of options to choose from in any niche. You picked a niche, there was maybe like two or three YouTubers within that niche that had like good videos and a good following and good content. And the internet was full wasn't the sorry the internet wasn't full at this time of overstimulating trashy slop content, or it was, but not as much, for sure, not absolutely not to the degree it is today. And so our brains, even though in like 2012 there was still a lot of choice to be made and there were still some overstimulating things about being able to make choices, in no way did we feel like we can't consume content anymore because the sea of options is just so overwhelming that we're just constantly paralyzed with analysis. So I think that this negative aspect of online dating is really important because I think it applies to our culture at large. I think that we've become so inundated with choice, so obsessed with individual autonomy in our individualistic society. We've become so obsessed with it that we've buried ourselves under a mountain of possibilities and choices and media and personalities and content creators. We've buried ourselves under a mountain of content to consume that we end up feeling like we've consumed none of it. And we're dissatisfied with the content we do consume because our brain is always going to wonder if there was content somewhere else that was better for us to consume, because the array of content that's available to us seems endless, absolutely endless. And I think that is one of the, I think it's very important to consider that when you start pursuing online dating. Um, my, so this would kind of be the third. Remember, there was three answers to this question. The first was, what are some of the benefits? The second was, what are the negative aspects? Those are kind of the broad answers. And the third is kind of my personal perspective as a Christian. What would I say to this? So, one of the things I would say is, I realize that there are a lot of things that can become or feel uncomfortable about dating. Trust me, dating is like the most awkward experience I ever had to go through. and, I, and I'm very thankful to the Lord that I don't have to go through it anymore. And I'm really sorry uh, for anyone that is. But it was just, it just is. There's nothing, there's no way around it. And I eventually had to accept that there's really no way around it. There are some lucky few who don't really have to go through it, but it can be such an awkward experience. Um, but I genuinely believe that the awkward experience of meeting someone in person, asking them out, going on dates, I think is very important. it's not just important for us as we're developing our social aptitude, but I really believe it's important for culture too, because the nuances that are involved in asking someone in person, meeting someone in person, going on dates, I think the nuances that are involved really help stitch together the important social fabrics of society. I mean, I wouldn't say it's the most important for sure. I think church and community are the most important. Church, family, and community are the most important parts of fabric of society. But um, I also think it's very important because number one, like I said, it helps us develop social skills in ways that we wouldn't even have expected to develop them, because you develop social skills in a way when you're dating that you just never thought that you would develop, and you don't really develop with just hanging out with friends. But then second, it also models what healthy pursuit looks like, not on a digital platform. And I think that's really important because, especially to our children, I think it's really important that they are able to see, um, in culture and in society, that they're able to see an example of, here is what pursuing a woman or pursuing a man looks like, and here is how you establish healthy social relationships. And so I think that it's a dangerous thing when the very thing that we are learning statistically and through scientific studies, finally, that we're learning is actually having a negative impact on the very development of our children's brains, social media. We're finally realizing that's happening. I think it's dangerous when that becomes the vehicle for dating relationships, because dating relationships are going to become the same type of thing that social media currently is. Rather than developing social structure, it's just going to delay it. Again, everything I'm saying is my personal perspective here in this third point. I do think that there are plenty of successful online dating relationships. I've known quite a few of them. I have met quite a few couples who met online. They're having a wonderful marriage. They have kids, everything. So obviously there are many exceptions. You know, as a Christian, I think it's easy to come up with reasons for why you want to do online dating as a Christian. But personally, and this would be my just 2 cents of advice to any kind of young guy out there who is a Christian, I would highly recommend that you wait. Wait before you jump onto a platform like Upward or Christian Mingle or whatever the kids are on these days. Uh, Wait. And the reason I would say that is several fold. First reason is, as a Christian, I think that I should say this, church culture, Christian culture and society, I think does a very, very poor job of instilling into young adult Christians how valuable, precious, and powerful their singleness is. And what has ended up happening is, rather than singleness being like a force for, like, this is something God's called you to, rather than being there, it's kind of subservient to marriage and relationship. And we look at singleness as, well, it's just a stepping stone to the next milestone, which is getting married and having a family. And I personally, I don't think that's true. And I also don't think scripture would argue that as well. I think Paul is very clear how valuable and precious singleness is. I think that singleness is just as precious as and powerful as marriage, but in a very different way. And I think that when you're single and you're looking at marriage as like the next rung of the ladder, or you're looking at it as the next milestone, I think you're looking at it in a way that demeans the value of singleness. And I think that singleness is something that's equally qualitative as marriage, but in a vastly different way. And there are vastly different challenges with marriage and singleness. And and hear me out. When I say singleness here, I'm talking about being called to singleness. And so I think that when we stop, I think that young men, especially young Christian men, need to stop before they pursue online dating. I think they need to stop and they need to wholeheartedly, 100% without equivocation, pursue singleness. Pursue singleness. Because as you pursue singleness, you will be pursuing being formed into the man that God wants you to be. And that is the calling that God has for you as a single man, is to be the man that he's called you to be. And trust me when I say, if you pursue that relentlessly and you allow God to make you into the man that he has called you to be, you will be infinitely more prepared to be the kind of husband he's called you to be when he leads you to marriage, or if he leads you to marriage. And I think that we jump to online dating so fast, not just as Christians, but in culture as general, because we feel there is a void that needs to be filled. It is true that Adam felt alone, that there was no helper, there was no one for him. But it is also true that Adam was very busy before he met Eve. He was very busy in the garden, naming all the animals and doing the work that God had made for him to do. In our singleness, in your singleness, as young men, God has given you work to do. Do that wholeheartedly to the best of your ability and do not relent. Pursue that relentlessly. And so that would be kind of one of my challenges to young men, is to just pause before you jump into online dating. Another thing I would say is it can be easy for us to fall into the pattern, young Christian men, it could be easy for us to fall into the pattern of feeling overwhelmed with choice. And as we do, we feel like we have, like, as we get into online dating, you feel like you have more control. And so you have higher expectations of who you're going to find. And there's, I don't remember, there was a kind of like a joke about like a woman who was like, I want to say, in the mission field, and she was like praying like to God, "Oh Lord, like please send me a husband. I really want a husband." And she's in the mission field, and this guy comes, parachuting down from a plane, and he's like, my plane just crashed, and I need food and I need water. And she's like, "Well, we don't have any. You're gonna have to you have to go to the city and get help there." And then this guy comes in a boat, and um he's like, "Can we have a place to stay?" And she's like, "We don't have any room, you're gonna have to go down to the next city." And so there was like one after the other. Well, this lady, dies at the end of her life, and she's in heaven, and she sees God, and she's like, "God, I prayed for 30, 40 years for you to send me a husband, but you never sent me a husband." God's like, "What are you talking about? I sent you a guy, in a plane and a parachute. I sent you a guy in a boat." And the whole point of I kind of butchered the joke, but the whole point of the joke is that when we are inundated with choices and our sense of control and expectation as a result heightens, we fall into the very, very dangerous trap of pursuing what our expectations are rather than accepting what God has for us. And God will give you options. He'll lead people into your life. And whether or not you decide to pursue them is your decision, but God will lead people to your life if you pray and are faithful and waiting upon him. He will. But when the danger about online dating is, especially as a Christian, is when we get to that point of realizing like you can just be swiping right and left all day long. It is very easy for our desires to come front and center fold, because now we've realized, wow, I have a lot more control over who I can pick, and therefore you have a lot more expectation that you're going to find the person that you want, not necessarily one that God wants or that God sends. I did not meet my wife through online dating. Met her at a wedding. And after being married to her for 2 years. Actually, our anniversary was just on Tuesday. I can safely say that I thank the Lord I did not end up with someone that I was looking for. I am infinitely thankful and blessed that I ended up with someone that the Lord wanted me to be with, because I had no idea how much of a blessing she would be and how much of a blessing she is. I didn't, because I was so just focused for such a large part of my life on the very specific nuances of a person that I want. This is the kind of person I'm looking for, because that's what online dating had done to me. That it wasn't until I let go of that and just completely let go and said, Lord, even if you call me to be single as Paul for the rest of my life, I have peace about that and joy, because I know the only one that satisfies me. When I did that is when I met Bethany. And there is no amount of thankfulness that will ever be enough to thank the Lord that He brought her into my life, because I can't imagine ever marrying someone else. So, um, wow, 40 minutes, kind of coming to the end here. Um, it is a very, very complex question. It is. I don't think that there's one answer that satisfies every possible conversation that could happen from this one question. But this is my perspective on the question of should you use online dating. And to kind of sum up my answers, there are aspects about online dating that are beneficial, um, as we mentioned a couple of those. But personally, I really do think that the negatives vastly outweigh it. And I'll say this: I'm not trying to say that you should never ever try online dating, but I am saying that you should be aware of the consequences and side effects before you jump into it. And I think that you should vastly, like, let's say there's 100% of your online experience, or sorry, your dating experience. I think online dating should maybe only be like 20%. And I think the majority of your dating experience, or your dating story, your journey, whatever it looks like, should be in person. It should be you putting yourself out there, feeling awkward, feeling uncomfortable, making those social connections. Absolutely. Putting yourself in places where you have to meet people, you have to form connections. I think that those are going to vastly equip you better, um, for life, than if you have 80% of your dating experience online. 100%. So this has been an episode of Adam Answers Anything. Thanks for joining me. It's been really great having everyone. If you have questions, again, feel free to scan the QR code. I'll also put that link in the description below, so you can click on that and ask a question as well. I would love for you to submit your questions. I would love for you to ask your own questions, because I would love to answer them. And also, even more importantly, I would love to hear your response to the questions that we wrestle with and the questions that we tackle here on the show. So leave a comment down below, or leave a message in the chat, and I would love to share that your perspective in our upcoming shows as well. So thanks for watching. Hope you guys have a wonderful and beautiful Saturday. It's supposed to thunderstorm here, so it'll be beautiful, just in a different way. But I will look forward to seeing you guys next time with our next question. And I actually do have our next question, but we'll have to wait till next time.